One of the first people elected, one of the only Republicans elected in that Democratic wave year of 2006. And this is it for Kevin McCarthy. I mean, he's always been the guy who's been able to build a base of support inside the party. Remember, they used to call themselves the Young Guns. Eric Cantor, Paul Ryan was the ideologue, the policy person in the kind of the casting of the House GOP a decade ago. Eric Cantor was the leader, the majority leader. And then you had in McCarthy, the recruiter, the guy who had a camaraderie and a rapport with the base. And so much of this, it's strange in a way for McCarthy to have so much of the opposition now be personal. It's not an ideological fight. I think that's such an important thing I try to remember. This really isn't about McCarthy being liberal or moderate. It's not like he's a problem solver caucus member running for speaker.
And the majority makers have his back. Those who won those purple districts in suburban New York City, those who won the competitive districts near Detroit, they're the ones who have penned letters and vocally said, it's Kevin McCarthy. That's our person. We're not looking for an alternative. The majority makers have his back. In previous elections, the Freedom Caucus may have had more outsized sway than it has at this particular Congress. But in this context, all they need is 5 to disrupt the speaker vote. I also think there's other pieces of history here that need to be noted. Today at noon, Hakeem Jeffries becomes Democratic leader, first African-American to lead a congressional party. And also, Catherine Clark will become the highest-ranking woman in Congress effective at noon. There's other pieces of history to note.
Any chance, Scott or Nicole, that the Democrats throw some votes to McCarthy to give him the job versus a more conservative member?
At this point, it seems unlikely. That's something I actually asked the incoming Democratic leader about last night. And he kind of deflected and said that he expects his Democratic members to be present and voting.
Hey, Nicole, real quick. I'm here with Congressman Swalwell of California. Congressman, we're here on CBS News Twitter Spaces. Any chance Democrats throw support to McCarthy on the floor today?
That is 100% not happening.
Why not?
Not happening. I mean, the guy stood with Donald Trump after January 6th when he said he wasn't, went down to Mar-a-Lago. I think he's an election denier, and we're not going to give votes to that guy.
So no shot?
No shot.
All
Zero.
Right. Thank you, Congressman. Nicole, back to you. That was Congressman Eric Swalwell of California.
Yeah, well, that was pretty much the sentiment or vibe, I guess, that I got from the incoming Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, last night, because I asked him point blank if there was any scenario where Democrats would help a leader McCarthy with the votes. And his response to me is that we are focused right now on making sure that every single Democrat is present and voting. And I hope, speaking of him, to earn everyone's vote. So he's more focused, as he should be, obviously, on getting enough votes to become minority leader. But on the same token, he didn't seem to suggest any willingness to assist the minority leader Kevin McCarthy with getting votes to become speaker. And I would also note, it was just only a couple of months ago that we spoke with another Democratic lawmaker who had been reached out to, had gotten been contacted to potentially support leader McCarthy. That was Congressman Henry Cuellar, who, as we know, is a moderate Democrat in a very split district and who has aligned himself at times with Republicans and at times with his own party with Democrats. But he swore up and down to me that he is a lifelong Democrat and there was just no chance that he would help a leader McCarthy with the votes. And while he told me that he was never contacted directly by McCarthy, he was contacted by some folks around him, some folks he told me on K Street, and some former members. So as much as Democrats say that they don't intend to help a leader McCarthy, you best believe that there was some outreach to try to woo some Democrats over to his side. But again, as of now, it seems they aren't biting.
And I'm told, Scott and Nicole, that just now from a couple sources inside the room, that the House Freedom Caucus essentially wanted to control the Rules Committee, and that was the breaking point.
That's a pretty big ask and a pretty heavy lift to control the powerful Rules Committee. And I think the rest of the conference might laugh that suggestion out of the room. But I think this is just a foreshadowing of problems to come. If they're having difficulty navigating the blocking and tackling of naming a speaker, what happens when The time comes for Republicans to cut a deal with the Democratic Senate or the White House to raise the debt ceiling or to keep the lights on at the federal government for the next spending bill. Are they going to make a move on McCarthy to try to vacate the chair to lose his speakership if he does something like ensure the debt ceiling is raised and financial catastrophe doesn't ensue? This is a harbinger of things to come.
But that being said, I would note that they feel that ultimately he will get there. They don't know how, but he will get there.
Well, I think the how is kind of they want to embarrass the Freedom Caucus. That seems to be the tone I keep hearing right out of HC5. They want to embarrass their colleagues and say to themselves, do you really want to go in front of the world today at noon and show the House Republicans in disarray? It's an embarrassment warning. That seems to be the big takeaway I have in my notes here.
Yeah, and the other thing I would note too is right before this transition, of course, the Speaker Nancy Pelosi held her last press conference of the year in late December, and I asked her then. I wanted to get her thoughts in terms of whether she had had any discussions with Leader McCarthy as they prepare for this transition. And at the time, she said they had not had anything formal. She just kind of has been dealing with him informally. But I also asked her if she had any advice for Leader McCarthy if he were to prevail. And, what was notable to me is that while she said, I don't give advice to people and I'm not going to be the mother-in-law here, she did make very clear that she hopes that Republicans can expeditiously elect a speaker because, in her words, the work of the Congress needs to get done. And so at the end of the day, I think that is something that not only someone like Nancy Pelosi feels strongly about, but a lot of these Republican members as well. And I think that is why there is this strategy of if we can wear down these no votes since they are in the minority, then ultimately McCarthy can prevail. And as of now, to me, that seems to be the working strategy. But again, it will depend on how much patience there is and how much tolerance there is for how protracted a process this could be.
And there seems to be nothing left on the shelf for McCarthy to give. He's offered significant seats on the Rules Committee, but not total control. He's offered to move the motion to vacate. That means that you can start the process to remove a speaker, bringing it down to one person. So he's done a lot, and there seems to be told the Freedom Caucus members if they cut a deal. And it's just a stalemate. Is this going to go to the floor? And who's going to blink first? That's really where we are in American democracy at 10:50 a.m. Eastern.
I really feel like this outside candidate, consensus candidate, is fan fiction. I think the three of us all have better odds of being NBA MVP than that happening. But it's interesting that so many things are on the table an hour and 10 minutes before this starts.
Well, there had also been talk about
Nicole,
whether or
Nicole, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm here with Congressman Jim Costa of California, no relation. I'm running into all these Californians. He's a blue dog, a moderate Democrat, I think it's fair to say.
Yes.
We're just talking about the consensus. Is there any chance Democrats get behind a consensus pick here, Congressman Costa?
Well, I think it's a bit premature, but
you don't rule
given
it out.
the dynamics that are taking place today, this is historic, and if they can choose a speaker here today, who knows what.
Who would it be if there's a consensus speaker? Who could get the votes from some Democrats? Come on.
There are a number of people that could fit that bill.
What about Fred Upton in Michigan?
Fred said, I talked to him last week. He's not interested.
I don't think many people are that interested in this job.
The dog who chases the car and finally caught it, and now what? Because he's got himself in a place that I don't think he can ever successfully govern with this group of folks.
Congressman Costa, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see you around the floor.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, carry on. Nicole, carry on. I'm right back. Make sure you're right back.
Yeah, the only other thing I was just going to chime in with, when we talk about a consensus candidate here, one name that has come up often but has not necessarily been embraced among a lot of members is the incoming majority leader, Steve Scalise, who was also the GOP whip, obviously the number 2 to Kevin McCarthy. And, while he has not actively campaigned for this job, that is another potential option. But in terms of many of the members that I have spoken to, they tend to say, well, I like Steve, but so even he doesn't seem to be, while he could be that obvious choice, right, being McCarthy's deputy, there still isn't even a consensus among him as a strong possibility. So to your point, it does seem that many Republicans are kind of all over the map in terms of who they think might be best suited. You have somebody like Congressman Don Bacon, who even wrote this op-ed proposing an agreeable Republican that could emerge as a consensus candidate, and that he might even be willing to work with Democrats to try to find that consensus candidate. So, and in talking to him earlier today, he still wouldn't tip his hat to a potential name, but suggested, it could be a member of Congress who might be leaving. But that being said, I mean, it's, if they can't settle on Kevin McCarthy, then who? And if they can't settle on that alternative, then who? And so that is why this is just still continues to be a very complex and confounding moment for House Republicans, but one that they are going to have to resolve and tackle in soon.
So we're an hour and 7 minutes away from this, and the list of no votes for McCarthy seems to be growing. You got Scott Perry and Lauren Boebert holding court outside this meeting room, expressing their displeasure. It's a very public way of saying, well, I'm not voting for Kevin if they're going to change their mind in an hour.
One thing I'm seeing right now, Mick Mulvaney, the former White House Chief of Staff, CBS contributor from time to time, with Frank Luntz, the longtime friend of McCarthy. Just really quick, looking at the questions here. Who's a secret alternative from Robert Waldeck? Upton. We just talked to Jim Costa, California, about that. No relation. He doesn't think Upton wants the job. Why is this a closed-door meeting only? Because it's a private political meeting inside the House GOP. Who's leaking out the details? Well, members are coming out and pretty much leaking it in the sense of just sharing information. It's not really all leaks. Some people text from time to time. Will McCarthy ask Dem leadership to vote to present like Boehner did? Would they be open to helping him? We've gotten some answers on that. Does the GOP leadership have a plan B? I think that they can't have a plan B if you're a McCarthy ally because you want to stay on the floor. The minute this thing comes off the floor, then there's a chance that it becomes political theater in a private room, or there's a lot of political bloodletting. So in the shorthand of all this, there's no appetite for McCarthy to leave the floor today and have a private huddle, because then that's the kind of scenario McCarthy allies fear where an alternative could emerge. Any final thoughts, Scott, Nicole? I know we have to wrap up and get back to work here.
This was not a good hour for Kevin McCarthy's prospects on the first ballot. Feels like it's going to be a long afternoon.
Well, my first lesson in politics is to never predict anything. Politics is always a surprise. And so I am just waiting with bated breath to see how things play out today.
We shall see, but it's going to be one or the other. That's for sure. So thanks very much for joining us here on this Twitter Spaces. We're going to get back. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Back to work.
What's that?